Dr. Jannell MacAulay, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Ricky. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you on. As I shared with you before we started recording, I'm truly intrigued. I've spent some time getting to know you a little bit more through your content online, your TED Talk. I got a chance to review your website even more. We were introduced through a colleague, and I'm really thrilled to have you on to have a discussion, to put information more out there, because that's what we are. We are information providers. I even said this to you before we started recording. We didn't invent mindfulness. We didn't invent meditation, yoga, self hypnosis, all these things. We are just putting it in a different perspective so more people use it. And so I absolutely commend you. First of all, thank you for your service for our country.
Appreciate the support. Thank you so much. And you nailed it. We really are helping people, I think, reconnect with something that is really inside of us, right? This is a human being thing that has been successful for centuries, and it's just changing the messaging around it. So I am really excited to be here and share some of my experience and my work and research with your viewership today, and really have a great conversation.
Yeah, we have a lot of synergy. I was actually watching some of the things that you've done. I've read some of your content, and I was saying earlier again, there we're overlapping some of the same phrases, and we're putting in such a way where people can use that information to get a better perspective. So my question to you is: now that you're not in the military, now you're a coach, you're a leader, you're a speaker, you're a consultant, a very busy person. I'm just so glad that you had time for this because you're busy as well. You told me you were on a 3-hour call this morning, just alone in training. Um, let's back up a little bit. You're 20 years in the military. Where was the point where mindfulness itself was all of a sudden, wait a second, I better look into this?
That's a great question. And to really answer it, I'm going to go back just a little bit further for you.
Please.
So when I grew up in a family of public servants. I had grandfathers, my uncle were all in the military. My dad was a police officer and detective. My mother was a nurse. I think from a young age, I had just really had this calling to serve my community in some way, shape, or form. I did various things even as a youth with through the church programs, as well as I was a juvenile justice commissioner as a teen. And so I always felt like wanted to be involved in something bigger than myself. And what also kind of at the same time, is this family that I was around, my dad used to use specific messaging with me. And in particular, he would tell anyone that would listen. And I'm talking like I'm 7 years old and we'd run into people at the grocery store. And he would literally tell them that I was going to grow up to be a submarine warfare commander or a combat pilot. And, at the time, those jobs weren't even open to women, right? This was the 1980s. But I grew up with this idea that society didn't put any barriers on anything that I could do, right? If I could dream it, I could become it. And it was really powerful for a young girl, right? And he kind of kept emphasizing that type of language and messaging throughout my entire youth that, I could, just because someone said no, or there was some type of barrier in the way, like I could, with hard work, with dedication, with commitment, with grit, right? I could find my way around it to get to the yes I needed. And so that's really where I grew up. It sent me on this path where I went to the Air Force Academy. I had some challenges there. I literally, my freshman year, broke my femur in half. Long story how that happened, but there were a bunch of people, doctors in particular, that were telling me as a 17-year-old, you will never fly airplanes, right? Like I just gotten into the Air Force. I'm going into like executing these dreams I have. They were saying I was never going to fly. I was probably not going to be able to run. I was going to have significant issues. And I remember thinking, no one else gets to write my story for me, right? Like I'm the one that has control over that. And that kind of was that upbringing I had. And so from that point on, like no matter what challenges I faced in my career, I knew that I could write my own narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And, but what I'd like to say is that got me to a point of success. I was hardworking, right? I met all the goals. And from the outside looking in, for all intents and purposes, people would have said, man, she has it all. She has a family. She has a successful, spouse. She's a military spouse. She has this great career. She's a leader. She's a pilot. She's doing all these things. But deep down, I was pretty miserable, right? Like on the inside. And it was because I couldn't see the joy in my journey, right? I was so focused on the laboring and the hard work and the getting to the yeses that I was really mind wandering through like the happy moments in my life. I think many of us do this where we tell ourselves things like, well, as soon as I'm done with this degree, I'll finally take care of myself. As soon as
Right.
I'm done with this big project at work, I'll finally pay attention to my family, right? Like and then what happens is we meet that milestone and there's another one right behind it. And that was really the life that I led. And so I would like to say that the way that my dad and parents kind of raised me was amazing, but incomplete, right? It was missing a piece. And what that piece was my ability to live more present. And
Hmm.
I really kind of hit a brick wall at a point in my career. And luckily, when I hit that brick wall, I went back to school and I was getting my PhD. And I sat there thinking, what strategic problem do I want to solve? And I thought, man, I want to know why life has to be so hard and how we can be successful, accelerate our professional success without having to sacrifice our health and relationships in the journey. So that's really what I started to study. And as any good researcher, I came across this idea of shaping our mindset and mindfulness and living present. And all of a sudden, it was like I had found the missing piece to kind of my professional and personal life and the journey ahead of me.
And you said two things here that kind of caught my attention. One was mind wandering, because we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of letting our mind wander, and yet at the same time, think it controls us,
Mhm.
and we forget that we are in control of it. And I'm sure in your hours of training and even your coaching sessions, that's a key element of getting people's attention is realizing that they have control of their thoughts and where they are going to take us, whether they're good, bad, negative, inspiring, enthusiastic, inspirational, or even passionate or present. I think that that's a really cool analogy of putting it, mind wandering, because all too often we do. And then you mentioned, putting off things until they happen, or thinking we're going to be successful when this happens. We're going to be happy when this happens. We're going to be more grateful when this happens. Why not now? I mean,
Exactly.
this is something I was so nice to hear you say that, because all too often, I'm sure that you've spoken to individuals who have looked for you for leadership. And then there are others that, that understand it, but the process never ends.
Oh, it's continuous. You're absolutely right. And I think that was something that, we live our lives stressful moment to stressful moment to stressful moment, right? Instead of slowing down and see the spaces so that we can see those spaces in between, right?
Right.
The spaces where there's laughter, where there's love, where there's learning, where there's joy, right? We miss those when we just focus on the laboring and the hard work. I mean, it's vitally important. And I'm raising my kids with a deep understanding about hard work and commitment, right? Mental skills need to lay on top of that, right? They're
Right.
not like, hey, you can think yourself into anything you want to be,
Right. Right.
right? Like, no, you have to be resourced. You have to put in the training and the hard work. But when you weave in mental skills and mindset training, as you know as well, right? It can amplify the experience and enable you to see it in a richer and more fulfilling way. And that's something that as I was a military leader, I looked up at the leaders above me. And I never once said something like, well, I don't want to be a leader because I don't want the responsibility or the leadership and that comes with it. I always looked up and said, I don't know that I want that life, right? Like the life that is built around these jobs that we have. And
Mhm.
so that was kind of my mission, was to change that. Like I wanted to be the kind of leader that people could look up to and think, man, I want her job. Like I want to be a leader and have that responsibility and also have the light, this rich and fulfilling life around me. So that's really where it came into. And I call it, command your mindset is really the title of the presentation and the keynotes that I give and the training I provide, because I think that's the missing element, right? We need
Mhm.
to get command of our mindset, right? Just like we would command in the military, like a lot of other things, because then you are in control of your thoughts instead of your thoughts, right, being the director of your life.
Right. I mean, absolutely. One of the examples I use even every day, in my live programs, these virtual programs, is that we gravitate to the remote control to change the channel on the TV. I mean, that's probably one of the most used appliance in our house is the remote control, and we hit the pause button all the time. We hit the play button, we hit the stop button, we hit rewind and forward. But how often do we do it for ourselves? How often do we actually think it's that easy? And it is. People overcomplicate these things. I find that the ones that don't understand the investment in themselves, the taking action and awareness, think it's too difficult, think it doesn't work for on them. And those are the type of people I am more engaged to say, okay, but let's talk why. What's the why? Why are you where you are now with this thought process? And is it possible? Because I know it's possible that we can have a different mindset, and so could you. And we take people to the next level. And I'm sure, and I've kind of noticed this from your material. We take people on a journey of self-actualization. We take people on a journey of getting really personal with themselves, not verbally, but more on the emotional connection between our ears. And I think that overlaps. When we start to get more personal with ourselves, we can become better versions of ourselves. And,
Definitely.
and then we work better with other people. Unconsciously, we do. And we don't even realize it. I mean, how often have you found yourself attracted to have a conversation with somebody that's motivating, that's inspirational, that's mentoring, that is grateful and giving, and yet at the same time we push ourselves away from people that really just want to dump all the negative because it makes them feel good.
Right. Exactly. One thing, so I'm sure in my bio, you kind of will introduce, I work with Pete Carroll. And one thing that kind of bonded us together when we first had one of our first conversations was this idea. I was a leader, a leader in the military at the time. And he had this concept where he's like, if I help you be your best and you be your best and you be your best, and then you lock arms together, right, you make this very powerful team. And that was the same concept that I was doing when I was introducing mindfulness into the military. A lot of people were very skeptical about my methods, and it was definitely seen as this bold and unconventional style of leadership, because I did focus on helping each individual reflect a little bit, answer some really deep and important questions that no one had ever asked them. Things like, what does success mean to you? What do you value? What is your purpose? What is your vision for yourself? And once we figure out those answers, now how do we weave it into the team and the organization? Instead of just like in the military, sometimes we blanket, well, everyone's going to have the same mission and vision as the organization. That's how it goes. And we don't realize that the path to self-actualization and high performance is really through answering those deep and doing that self-discovery work.
Right.
And so that's something that we teach in our programs. I really try to emphasize with the military now, and I think they're finally getting it. They're finally understanding, like, we don't want a whole bunch of GI Joes that are identical, right? Like, we need to embrace the authenticity and uniqueness that every member brings to the table. And when we do that, we can amplify achieving those mission objectives and what we can accomplish as an organization.
I mean, now you're talking my language too. And it was funny because you and I both were talking a couple weeks ago about the connection with Pete Carroll. And Pete was the very first coach that brought me in to perform and speak for a football team. And I was obviously it was college at the time with you when he was with USC. And I still remember the day that he called me personally on my cell phone, and he goes, "I want you here." And it was like 2 days later, I was already out there working with the team, and it was an incredible experience. And to this day, one of the most memorable because again, I'm 5'7", 165 pounds, and here are linebackers and linemen. They're huge, and again, they're probably very skeptical who this person was. But once we start talking, they forget that you know perception, and they just start embracing something really simple. And he brought me in for that reason. So I doesn't doubt me at all that he immediately engaged with what you're doing, because he said to me, he goes, "I love what you're doing. And I really want to show the players a concept here. And that's why I was there in the first place, to show them the power of the mind." And so it doesn't surprise me at all that he has embraced your programs and it still continually embraces them. That's really, really cool. Eh,
Exactly. We found a great partnership with it to help expand that message, right, to a larger audience.
and we're expanding it to the corporate market as well. Companies that never thought they would ever introduce something like this, or maybe that was a buzzword or a check mark, on the culture. Oh, sure, we do mindfulness. Well, what does that mean for you? I don't know. It's on the mission statement. But what does it mean? What are you doing? Because it's happening all the time now. And I think you are finding, just like I am, in this changing environment that we're in, mindfulness itself, technique, that's the key word, is not going to be the check mark on the, well, sure, we cover that. This is going to be and is becoming part of cultures. I'm on calls now every day with organizations saying, help my team now that we're virtual. We can't get face to face. How can we engage people through this lens and keep them engaged and motivated? How can we invest in them, like what you're doing too in your coaching, to be better versions of themselves?
Exactly. And it starts with awareness. I mean, that's what alluded to earlier as well, right? I like to say kind of you read a page in a book, you get to the bottom and you don't even remember what you read, and because you're mind wandering and distracted, and you have to maybe go back 3 or 4 pages before you realize this is where I stopped paying attention. And that's what's happening in a lot of our worlds. We're losing
Absolutely.
connection, right? We're losing, which then if you lose connection, you lose the ability to build trust. You lose the ability to really build that high performing, authentic team. And I think there's a lot of dangers with that, because then there's a lot of wasted productivity, wasted energy, and definitely a loss of efficiency. But not only that, like, you're losing the opportunity to see where the potential of your organization or each individual can really go. So yeah, awareness like really is that foundational skill, which, we teach, and I teach mindfulness as like the foundational skill for shaping and getting command of your mindset, right? If you're not present and aware, then no matter what other layering mindset skill I teach you, it's not going to be as effective unless you're actually living in the moment. So that's really where we like to kind of start with mindfulness as the best tool.
So let me ask you a question. So you've got somebody that's brings you on, as a coach here, leader, consultant, and they're going to engage in your programs. You and I both know there are people in the audience that go, "This is not for me."
Mhm.
I think that's our biggest challenge. What we do when we talk about it's easy. It's easy for us. We do this every single day. It's part of our programming. But when we engage somebody that's completely, arms crossed, when is this over? Already looking at their watch. It's the worst thing as a speaker when we see somebody look at their watch. It's like the worst insult to us, like, what do you mean? I just, how can that be? I actually, you looked at your watch. You're already concerned when this is over or how much time has gone by. I guess what's your biggest objective, or I'm sorry, objection, or how do you overcome or engage people that are not engaged? And I know that's a broad question to ask you, and I'm putting you a little bit on the spot here, but I'm kind of curious because I'm sure this happens.
Yes, yes. I work with tough crowds, right? Military, first responders, law enforcement, like people who really see this as kind of a, alternative, hippy dippy kind of vibe to it, like a soft skill. And so I
Ooh,
approach it with
you know
three
what?
different things.
I'm gonna stop you here. You just
Yeah.
said something exactly, because people think of this maybe as a soft skill. I'm a hard, tough executive. I'm a hard, tough leader. I'm the top salesperson. I'm not going to let somebody get into my head. There is no way. I worked with athletes that go, "You're not controlling me." I'm not controlling you, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And my answer always is it's a hard skill, and it's a skill that puts you on the cutting edge of things. It's a
Yeah.
misnomer, I think, around the soft skill space. But so 3 things is like how I go into many of my engagements and presentations and training
Mhm.
sessions. The first thing is with the messaging I use. So I don't call it soft skills, right? I
Mhm.
call them hard skills, and I use the language of not, hey, I'm going to teach you about this skill set called mindfulness to make you like more relaxed and like improve your well-being, right? Some hard ass, like, military operators gonna be like, no, thanks. Right. Like, I don't need, like, don't talk to me about well-being and meaningful life. Right. Like, and hugging the trees, like, not gonna get good, not gonna go there. So instead, what I ask is, who wants to be a badass? Right. Like, who wants to like really show up for life and every day know that you gave it your all, you put your best self forward, right, to be your best in any environment. And in most cases, the high stress occupations I work with really operate in arenas of consequence and environments that are extremely stressful and rugged. So we are expected to go into these unpredictable spaces and have the psychological flexibility to be badass, right, in those
Mhm.
moments. And so it's about the messaging. It's around performance. It's around like showing up, right? So that's the first way. And then the second thing I do, because even with that message, there are still people with their arms that are like, I'm already badass. Like, I don't need this kind of
Right.
attitude. And so my second thought is that, the majority of human beings, right? Pain is the driver for change, right? And so if they're not suffering from anything at that moment, right, they're not going to see the need to change in any way, shape, or form, right? A lot of people will be content, or they're not aware that they're in pain or they're having some type of level of suffering, right?
Right.
So I like to think that I plant a seed, right? So they may not be ready, because we're all on our own journeys. They may not be ready for the message today or even tomorrow, but I've heard from enough people over the course of the time that I've been doing this, where they write me, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years later, and say, I didn't truly appreciate your message when I first heard it, but I remembered it. And when life got tough,
Yep.
I remembered that there were things I could do to help myself in those moments. And so that's what I anchor on a lot,
I
right?
love
When I
it.
think about, not everybody, it's not going to be for everybody today, but at some point it will be, right? We can't all be in the hustle forever, right? Everyone's got that limit point.
Right.
And then the third thing I think about is, I have heard from enough audience members and enough of my engagements from individuals who are like, and I'm sure you get this too, literally, this changed my life.
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting and there's speaking to a crowd of 300 people, and there's one person in there that will walk away and their life is changed from the information that I provided, right? Like, that's worth it to me, right? That makes that engagement and that interaction, worthwhile to put, invest my time and effort in, because that's what it really is about, right? You and I are in the business of changing, not just changing, but transforming people's lives for the better, so that they have better and deeper relationships. They are higher performing. They have greater levels of success and joy, like, combined. That's kind of my ultimate end goal. So that's really what I focus on.
You know, and I'm glad you shared that too, because we do offer information that might not apply to you right this very moment, as you said, but we want to just kind of put this in your toolbox. Just be open, just be present with me right now. Give me your time for the 30 minutes or the 60 minutes that I'm speaking to you, because there will be something that at one point will resonate with you. And if it resonates with you, and if you kind of have that connection with that statement, that phrase, the story, the example, the technique, that can be more powerful and can exceed your expectations in every single level. And to us, to you and I'm saying that that's one of our greatest fuels, is hearing from somebody that says, okay, this made a profound effect on me. And when they say thank you, and I'm sure you feel the same way, we're thinking we're more excited, we're more humbled by it. It's not about me, it's about you.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be thanking you. Thank you for acknowledging that maybe I was the coach here, that maybe something I said kind of leaded you. But remember, you're the one that actually did the performance of it, or the follow through, like you working with the athletes or the corporate leader, or the executive. We can sit here and talk about this. It's the action on the individual, and that's where it comes from, is getting the person to, and then you said this too, awareness and action of our best of intentions, make them our greatest accomplishments. And then from there, keep striving to become better. I mean, that's what great leaders do. Great leaders not only lead people, but lead them to become better.
Right. And whether you're a speaker or a leader, it's about that transformation. And so I don't want to be known as like an inspirational or motivational speaker, because those are fleeting things, right? Like, I can inspire you with a really cool story about my background or
Mhm.
something, and you'll walk out of the speech thinking, oh, wow, like, that was really cool.
Right.
But that's not, I don't care what you think about my story or me. Like, I want you to think and reflect on the information I'm sharing through the storytelling I use, right? And think back to, like, gosh, I could do this better.
Yeah.
I could be better. And now what am I going to do about it? She gave me some tools, right? She gave me some ways to transform and change, so that tomorrow I can be a better person, right? And then that's what I like to see, right? Like, that's what motivates me to continue to do what I do when I see those transformations. Motivation and inspiration are fleeting. They'll be gone,
Right.
right, later that day. So that's why it's that deeper. Like, I want people, I love the quote, or, I say this in my speeches all the time: the way you make people feel is more important than what they know. Now, I have a PhD. I hope I teach people things, right? In my presentations, like I hope they're like, oh, there's some research. Like she gave me some knowledge. Like maybe I put language around something that they knew about, but they weren't really sure how to articulate it for themselves.
Mhm.
Um, but ultimately, I hope I made them feel something, right? Like really deep in the gut,
Yeah.
so that they want to do better.
Exactly. And, you know, I've said this before, and again, I never wanted to offend anybody, but as a speaker, I never want to be hired to cheerlead or tell a story. I want to be hired as a content provider with take home value. And that's why I was excited to talk to you, because we shared so much of overlapping content. It's just the way you and I deliver it, and our then we kind of pivot to our own expertise, and you have yours and I have mine. And it's great to hear this, because it just validates again how important this is. So if you're a leader, you're an executive, whether you have a small team or large team, you know, what I'm saying, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think you will. Self discovery never ends, and we want you to use this information, be inspired. If this is something you've never dived into in your culture, and you want to take your team to the next level, and bring them closer together. When I say close together, I mean closer together within themselves. Then explore this information. Explore whether it's myself or Jannell. Explore this information and look for ways to invest. And I say invest in your team. Invest in them, because we do spend so much money on technology. Don't get me wrong, technology training, technology improvement. We update our everything from our physical ability, our products itself. But how often do we give ourselves a makeover of the mind?
We
And
don't.
yeah.
We don't. And you know what I like to say? It's funny because if I was selling gym equipment, right, like physical gym equipment, like the military gets that, right? They're like, okay, what's the acquisition program around it? Like, how much do I have to pay? What do I equip everybody with? Like, and when I tell them, no, it's like your breath, which is free and it's always with you, right? So we just have to teach people how to use their breath,
Right.
teach people how to train their minds, right? It's a mental gym. And they're like, we don't get it. We don't understand that. And so when you're talking about the investment that needs to happen, it's sometimes just I know we're on the precipice of a change, right? People are starting to understand, especially with the domination of our digital devices now, right? We need something to help us stay less distracted and more focused, more calm, more high performing, more aware. And mental skills, right? I call it mental push-ups, right? Mindfulness is doing mental push-ups. It's training your attention system to
Right.
stay focused in the moment. And so you have to do those push-ups. It's just, you wouldn't expect the same thing out of your physical strength, right? Like you can't do one physical push-up and then think, oh, I'm amazing and I can do these all day and I'm a physical specimen of excellence. And it's the same thing with our minds. And so we're getting there, I think, with the understanding of the investment that is required, both in time and in programs, to get us to where we need to go, to be, especially in like the high stress occupations that I work in. I like to say that we need performance enhancements, right, to make us better at what we do. But in today's world, what we need now more than ever is this connection back to our ancient warrior, where we are building psychological flexibility, a disciplined mind, the ability, what I call, it's training mental prehab, to be exposed to psychological and emotional trauma and not just bounce back from it, but bounce forward. And so that's really where I think the important skill sets lie and investment needs to happen.
Well, Dr. Jannell MacAulay, I'm going to put all of your information, more about your bio, links to your website at rickykalmon.com. That way, listeners, if they're intrigued, they want to find out more about you, they'll definitely visit rickykalmon.com for more information. This was a great conversation, but I don't want it to end. I'd love to have you back, and new information that you're going to have on mindfulness coaching, your training programs. If something new comes up in the future, you are always welcome back.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, I would love to connect with any of your listeners, whether it's with my own individual programming or my partnership with Pete Carroll and our work with the Warrior's Edge program. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your show. This was a great conversation. We could talk for hours, I'm sure.
I think we could. I think we could. I want to pick your brain some more, which is good. So I'm going to leave it short and sweet, and we're going to bring it back in another conversation. But this was a great start to many, many more. And as I said, I'm going to put all your information and links to everything on rickykalmon.com. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Ricky.